Welcome everyone once more to this joint session between Mindly and Ample Therapy, combining the simple and ample approach. We have once more Coach Inayat Kanji. Welcome Inayat, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me back on your platform.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure. And the kind of comments we are getting, people are asking a bunch of questions. They are very curious to know more and how people coming from a variety of backgrounds can relate to the stories that we bring in here. And that's actually the purpose of this joint platform, where we are simply talking about how to take care of ourselves, how to take care of our inside here, and
Mm.
so that we can actually be better versions of ourselves. And it's a diminishing problem the more we share with each other. And speaking of questions, given that we have done so many sessions before, we have actually collected a bunch of questions, and some of them have been answered, but to be fair, there are so many of them to be answered. So we have decided to just talk through some of these questions and answer. How does that sound, Inayat?
Yeah, no, as I said, I think it'll be fun. It'll be fun. We'll be able to have a wider discussion.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to your answers, because I find your answers at the juncture of life experience as well as playfulness, as well as, reflective things. So there's a bunch of things that get mixed up, and that's something I
Appreciate it.
really appreciate. And I feel that even though this topic is very serious, does not mean that we have to be serious or depressed about this. The In fact, ironically, the lighter we are, the better solutions we get.
Most definitely, as we learn in comedy, as long as we don't utilize it all the time as an avoidance, but sometimes it's a balance of things, right? One
Yeah.
doesn't want to spend too much time in heavy emotion, because, as I say, it's very pressing on the soul, so and on the mind.
Yeah, that's very true. In fact, if you see me looking up, I'm reading out questions from a list here that we have
Mm.
made. And if you see me looking down, I do take some notes while speaking so that we can come back to it. And I was about to start with one particular question, but your comment about comedy actually triggered a different thought. And many a times people use sarcasm
Mm.
as a shield, especially when they feel hurt. And most of, in fact, the best of comedians have a big story behind, a deep story that could be very sad in the so-called natural world, but they use that pain to convert it to comedy, to switch situations, and to take it. And I mean, without naming names, if you just Google, there's so many comedians who actually bring forth smiles in front of others, but originally it was inspired by pain. What do you think of that? And have you
Mm.
met other people in person? What's your experience?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. It's quite something actually, somewhat is quite close to my consciousness in that because I was an aspiring entertainer to some degree, whether it's an actor, presenter, I did a little bit of comedy, some I do stand up, hosting, right? But you're around these figures, people with lots of talent, lots of performative talent, and some who are extremely witty and comical.
Yeah,
But what I
they're very
found
clever,
is
very clever.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's extremely clever. It's interesting, actually. Many of us used to be teachers. I don't know what that says about the education system or us, but the point is, obviously a teacher is supposed to be somebody who's academic, right? So
Right,
there's an art, there's a skill set, there's a pattern to comedy. There's a
right.
beat, there's a flow, right? So it is very much an academic process. So, like you say, why I'm mentioning that is because young people grow up in a household where, let's say, it's twofold. Either the surrounding
Mm-hmm.
is very stressful, empty of positive emotion. Generally, as you
Supportive.
mentioned, there's no smiles in the house, essentially, right?
Yeah, empty of support, isn't it? Unhelpful
And
situation. Yeah.
yeah, empty of support. But even beyond that, beyond the support, sometimes it might be that parents want to be supporting, but they themselves don't know how
Mm.
to cope with life, and thus they energetically are drained, and thus they generally struggle to find comfort in lighter positive emotion. That's why I was saying, even initially, it's not good to sit in pressing heavy emotions all the time. There's a time and place. When one is
Yeah.
grieving, as I mentioned to you off air, if I was grieving, I would need to cry. But
Mm.
if I was to cry for a year, it
Mm.
gets to a stage of depression within bereavement rather than a healthy form of letting go of emotion. So, relating back to the comedy, young people in those environments will either, for the external environment, start to try and make
Mhm.
people laugh to lift the environment. It
Mm.
might not necessarily be that they internally are broken as such, but again,
Mhm.
it's cumulative, because when one is constantly trying to raise everybody else,
Yeah.
sometimes they can ignore the self, right?
Very
But then you
true.
have the flip side of things, where I've met many characters who, it might have been that within their life there were moments of trauma and stress. It may have
Mm.
not been continuous, it may have not been based upon consistent figures in their life, but rather their internal experience. And because they can't find laughter within, they can't find happiness within, they can't find peace within, they get almost attached to this performative excitement and laughter. It's like a drug, right? If I'm
It
feeling
helps them
sad,
feel
I tell a
better.
drug.
Yeah. It helps them
It,
feel better. It helps them feel safe as well. And I can share from my experience from childhood trauma that when I used to see anybody sad or worried or frustrated, I'm trying to please that person to make them laugh, because if everyone around me is smiling and laughing, I feel better. And as a child, I felt safer around laughing people than frustrated people. And I kind of automatically took it as a responsibility to start making. If I walk in and everybody is sad, I would do something that like a clown, or whichever way,
that's
and
interesting.
figure things out. And someone told me last week, you never
Yeah.
find a baby or an infant, or let's say a 3-year old, or and so as a child, we don't become serious. You don't find an infant sitting and being very serious, depressed, or anything. They are in the moment. They
Hmm.
are smiling or sad. If they're hungry, they're crying.
Yeah.
If they're content, they're looking at the roof or this and that and smiling.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the rest of it, as we grow up, it's a
Hmm.
learned thing. In fact, one of the things in both simple and ample is related to emotion, and this directly relates to that. The first question I had about ample, in fact, and we
Mm.
spoke about art in
Mm.
one of the sessions. Um, and the question is, how can we incorporate that in the workplace? Because I understand, and the person who is asking the question, they can get it how it is as a personal hobby, but
Mm.
how could we take it to the workplace? What do you think?
I want to try and answer it in two ways. To answer something which was a response, if anything, to something you said a moment ago, and also to your
Sure.
question.
Yeah. I know I switched the topics to
Yeah,
the
no, no,
question.
no. It's good. It's good. It's good. It's good because actually the two still segue. Because like sitting with emotion is something that is empowering,
Hmm.
enables one to understand himself, enables one to process situations and things that have happened. And so in a hyper functional world, often we don't have time to process. It's outcome based, right? Forgetting that the system is essentially powered by the individuals.
Hmm.
But often, in a corporate sense and government senses, the system takes over the individual.
Right.
And we forget about the, if you want to call them tools, right,
Hmm.
that we're utilizing.
Right.
Have we functionally serviced them? Have we done an MOT of them? Have we taken care of our tools? because these
Mm-hmm.
tools are what are propping up our system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's interesting. When I was in therapy myself as a patient,
Mm-hmm.
we were taught, when someone cries or someone's upset, don't try and stop them from experiencing that emotion,
Mm.
because for much of their life, they've taken a substance or something other to numb
Instead.
that emotion, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you take it to the work setting, how much time do we have for emotional understanding in the work setting?
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to art, what is art? Art is a form of performative expression,
Expression. Yeah.
an expression in a means of communication that is other than just prose conversation. So there can be so many ways. And if someone, like, I used to work in an innovation department,
Mm-hmm.
ideas, how do you find ideas? It has to be through a form of play. So
Mm-hmm.
there's twofold here. There can be the almost um, kind of the sense of healing and aiding your staff to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that they are in the best place to deliver their job, because they have a life outside of work, they have relationships inside of work. So often, for instance, something as easy as and simple as art therapy, where you give people a piece of paper and
Mm-hmm.
just say, draw what's on your mind, you'll be really enlightened as a manager to see what your department and your team comes up with, because
True.
you think you're interacting with your staff all day every day in meetings, you know what's going on for them, but all
Mm.
of a sudden you might find underneath that what's really occurring. Now, if we relate it back to business, you've talked about this before. If you want high performance within business, if you want outcome, why would you not care for those who essentially are mechanically keeping your business together? Why would you not care for that operation, that system in itself, the individual? And if anything, when you learn about them deeply, and if you
Mm-hmm.
enable them to process emotion and not have to park it every time they get to work, you
Mm-hmm.
probably will get better results for them in the long term as well. And that's just, as I say, an art therapy based thing. We can go into role playing and
Yeah.
drama and all sorts of other things, right? But I know
Yeah.
for a fact, as I'm sure we will discuss, that these therapies now are being utilized, because many people are seeing, even on sick days, how many people lose time to sick days? How many people can honestly say, I have some mental health issues at the moment, I have some physical issues? People are so scared to tell their employers. And if employers took more of a therapeutic response like this, I'm sure people will be much more expressive and feel closer to their staff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I would add a couple of examples that
Please.
I have seen in real life that have been working, and that aligns with another question that is there. The question was, what are some budget-friendly ways to do this in the workplace? So I'll try to combine both the things here. I know someone who does glass art, and in fact she is a very senior person in a technology company, but as a hobby she does glass art, and she started to teach this to corporate, and many people come and do that as a safe way of expressing themselves. And there is one where you can use insulation tape on walls and the tapes are of different colors and they express themselves. One of them, which has become really popular, is you take a cup, a clay cup, and you start painting and it takes an hour or so, and then you give it to the facilitator, because then it has to go into the oven and it stays there overnight or whatever, and it's delivered back to the office. And you can create amazing designs. But
Hmm.
here's the interesting thing that worked better than just the design. They said, do one for yourself and one for someone else in the company,
Hmm.
and then they become coffee buddies or tea buddies, etc. And that I felt that was a very great way of bringing that well-being together. You will be surprised how these kind of things are being produced, and these are
Well,
very
yeah,
budget friendly. These
Well,
are
you know,
very
it's
much.
interest. It's
Yeah,
interesting because you know, again, you catalyze my thought. So I'll make it short because I know we've got questions to get through. But you know, being a sports fan, you know, often people talk about managerial changes. Let's say in football, you know, why
yeah,
has it affected a team so much, right? And when a team is playing for one another and bonding with another, like you know,
right.
it doesn't matter whether you have the best players in the world. Sometimes they just don't gel because chemistry is not there, you know. And so, like you say, to bond in a team in a workplace, if a manager is focused on outcome only and hasn't understood the other side of things, you know, you
Yeah,
still have benefit, right? But it's so holistically beneficial to your staff on multiple levels. But even just from the performative aspect, as you say, you will get
yeah.
much more out of your team if they're bonded.
In fact, it's amazing to see the kind of ideas that people come up with when the intent is shared that we are trying to do this. And a bunch of these are really low budget. And we did explain some of the artistic ways of things, but there are so many new things other than in like physical exercise, like expressing using writing, expressing using creative competitions. So it's a competition because there is a time limit, but it's a creative competition, meaning people are creating something which is useful. uh, there are many, in fact Atlassian is one of the companies who have pioneered this. It's an originally an Australian company, and they said you get 24 hours, you can do whatever you want to do for those 24 hours with only one condition: at the end of 24 hours you got to showcase it to the rest of the company.
Hmm.
So and people have come up with mind blowing ideas in those 24 hours, and some of them have become commercial, some of them have become artistic, some of them, but it has all helped in the well being. Here you mentioned about the leaders and being focused on outcome, and I have three questions here which I will read them out because the answer could be combined.
Nice.
One of them is, I am going from one task to another task, all of them being urgent, and how do I find time for well being? The second one is, many a times founders and leaders themselves forget this because they're busy taking care of the rest of the team. In fact, I would agree that these days, especially in the recent years, many founders and many leaders do care about their employees more than just outcome, but unfortunately they also forget themselves.
Hmm.
And the third one could be, how can a leader showcase well-being to the rest of the team without looking soft? So I think
Hmm.
these three would be connected because they all three reach to the leader or the founder
Most
taking care.
definitely.
What are
Most
your
definitely.
thoughts on that?
Well, let me start with the last one, and maybe you can jump in on the first two. The idea of looking soft. Uh,
Hmm.
I think what it is because actually, while you're speaking, I started having a thought about that process. You know, because I know people like that that think, you know, doing sound therapy at work is just a bit of a waste of time. And then my staff are going to think that I'm a pushover. And then their outcomes are going to be less. And then they're going to work less. Then they're going to do, and it's all fear led essentially. The idea I'm going to lose control.
Right.
And in that process, we identify it as soft because the idea, if I'm a hard taskmaster, I can
Mm-hmm.
push and drive my team.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, we are an evolving species. And what used to work before. You know, like I said, I gave the football analogy because as a sports enthusiast, you know, you used to get what you call the Sir Alex hairdryer treatment, you know, from Mr. Ferguson, where it's shout in your face, right? But if you were to do that to a youngster now, it just wouldn't work. So in the same sense, I say to bosses now, we're not in the 80s. You know, people
Mm.
aren't smoking cigarettes at their desk and just banging it out. You know, like we are a health conscious nation. You know,
Mm-hmm.
imagine that, you know, because think about it, previously, you would smoke in your work environment, you know, it was a hard play, hard work kind of environment, you know, like everything was around this resilience.
Right.
But as you've taught me, safety and security, sharing and connection brings resilience,
Mm.
not the other way around.
Mm.
So if you want your staff to be resilient, you want you to be seen as resilient. Resilience is also being able to understand some of the darker issues of the individuals around you and enable them and optimize it and support them and enhance their, their existence, right? So being dismissive and saying we don't need it, it's a waste of time, it's going to make me look soft, in fact, is quite a weak response in today's age, in my opinion, because you can't escape this conversation. Everyone's having it, you know.
I think the
So yeah,
definition of soft itself is something that we need to relook at here, because see, the kind of words and expressions that we use and the definitions we look at define our understanding. And I use a term which is taught in hospitals called compassionate detachment, where you have to be compassionate so that you take care of a patient, but you got to be detached so that you take care of the patient.
yes,
If you start crying just because the other person is hurt, then you cannot help them, because then you're not putting your own oxygen mask to start with. So we are
very true.
becoming that compassionate, detached leader, so that we can help them. At the same time, this is from a point of love and care, and
Mm,
more care in the workplace than the normal way people express love. It's more about empathy, it's more
mhm,
about concern, rather than it's a soft kind of thing. And
mhm,
when someone sees a good deed as a soft deed, it says something about their own insecurity, because
mm,
it's less about, I mean, it's not that everybody has to be tough as nails and shouting military orders in order to be the leader. A leader can be patient. A
mm,
leader has to eat their own words. Even if they want to shout, they
mhm,
might have to just gulp it and say the right kind of thing, so that they can be empathetic instead of creating an unsafe environment. And instead of labeling them as soft, we should actually appreciate them as caring.
mhm,
uh, and I would be very mechanical in sharing this. In order
mhm.
to create a nail or a hammer or something, first you have to melt the metal. To melt the metal, you have to make it soft. If you can't
Mhm.
make it soft physically, you can't make something hard out of it, right?
That's
If you look
that's
at,
deep. That's deep. I like that one. That's a new one. I haven't heard that. It has to be malleable first, right? Like that's very true.
yeah.
Very true.
And I'll come to the second one here, where they mentioned
Mm,
about I'm going from um, emergency to emergency.
mm,
And here the same thing applies, like they say in airplanes: put your own oxygen mask first, and then you can help the other person. If we are not able to take care of our own self as leaders, then we may not be able to do a good level of service to the team and the
mm,
employees, because we are ourselves suffering. And what happens is, without knowing, and probably out of goodness of heart or because of past situations, people forget the line between doing something good and being a martyr.
yes.
And uh, when we don't put our own oxygen mask first, there are two patients minimum, there may be more.
Hmm.
But if we first take care of our own self as a leader,
Hmm.
then that one person could be taking care of five more, just because they are at the position of strength. As a
That's
simple
true.
example, I was once called, and I've been trained as a professional first aider. But in this situation, I was once called to an emergency in a hospital. But I was told that I cannot attend to it right away, because the person is being tested for COVID, so I have to wait.
Right.
And until the results are out, because otherwise I cannot approach. And the first thing I did was make sure I am hydrated. I went and I checked how long is it going to be. Do I need to eat something? Is there childcare required? Is there something else? So these, none of these are related to the actual emergency, but I'm
Hmm.
preparing myself so that I can take care of the next 24 hours, because
Hmm.
I'm hydrated, I'm rested, I'm fed, and so forth. So this is where, I mean, if you compare it with workplace,
Hmm.
Somebody is going really panicking because of some financial things, and we use something called an emotional wheel. And next time I'll bring it on screen as well. We ask them, is it really panic, or is it somebody did not give you the information in time and you are going to be judged that you are a poor employee, meaning
Mm.
you haven't performed? And the person takes a deep breath. We actually have a glass of water next to them so that, take a sip of water. He says, yes, yes, it's not my fault. If I had the information, I would have done it. So then we understand it was not panic. It was more like they thought they are at fault. If they had the information, they would have done it. Then
Hmm.
I ask them the next question: is it lack of information, or passing blame? Put it
Hmm.
whichever way.
Hmm.
Or was it lack of training? The other person did not know that they were supposed to send this email to you this morning on first of every month.
Hmm.
And then oh yeah, I never told them to send this email every month to me. If I had told them, if I had trained my team to do this, they would have sent it. If they had sent it, I would have had the information. If I had the information, I would have done this. And if I've done this, I would not be panicking. So a panic has slowly been broken down to a training issue.
Hmm.
And that training issue has slowly been broken down to a single step in the process. Like that was
Hmm.
simply in this case, as an example, every Monday, send this email to that guy with this information. And as
Hmm.
long as that becomes a policy or whatever, we have kind of resolved the situation
Resolved. Yeah.
to some extent. But yeah, we got to put our own oxygen mask instead of jumping from emergency to emergency.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Makes sense.
I have an interesting one, and I would love to hear your view on this.
Please.
Many people talk about gratitude,
Hmm.
and gratitude is very powerful in our day to day life, and there are so many books available these days. Many people know more about self help and so forth compared to the past. But the question here is, how can a small business foster a culture of gratitude to enhance emotional well being in the team? I think this is a good question.
Hmm. How can a small business? Hmm. That's interesting. Well, I mean, in some ways, I mean, how do we define a small business? Are we talking like in just a few staff members? We're talking about, a one-man band. What
I
kind of?
think where the question is coming from in
Hmm.
this case is, see, gratitude. Another way to look at gratitude is recognition, right? I mean,
Hmm.
somebody gets recognized, and the company says, "Pat on the back. Here is
Yeah.
5 grand as a reward, or here is a promotion."
Yeah.
But in small businesses, you can't be doing that every other day. Um, but I mean, I'll try to answer this from my experience. What people need to do is express recognition of how the other team member has helped them. And what we have
That's
done in
because.
some workshops,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah,
we
yeah.
have
No,
done in some
that's
work,
why. This is why. Sorry, I had to jump on you because
yeah,
this is why I posed the question because my thought was exactly that. In that, with big establishments, you will get external praise, you'll get awards, you'll get accolades, all sorts of different things, right? You could argue that's gratitude, right? I'm being appreciated, but you could
mhm,
also argue it's validation, right?
right, yeah,
Gratitude, as you just mentioned, and I'll let you continue. For
hmm,
me, is again, it's an internal process. It's what am I grateful for? So
right.
go back. Sorry.
So I am kind of saying that the first person to be grateful for, especially for mental health, is our own self. We forget how much we are doing for our own self,
Hmm.
especially when we are in a small business or entrepreneurial situation. I mean, I can actually sing a song about how great you are, but if I keep forgetting that I have done something as well, uh, for various reasons, lack of time, thinking it's egoistic, thinking it is narcissistic or something, but it cannot be lack of self love. right?
Mhm.
So that is the first place for gratitude. And what we could do in small teams is create these exercises where anonymously, because if you
Mhm.
start putting names, it becomes a different game.
Mhm.
Anonymously, we need to recognize what someone else has done and feel thankful about it. If you and me are in the same team, and you were supposed to go at 4 o'clock, but there was something to be done, and you stayed back and you helped with something else, and next Monday there is a note on your desk, thanks for being there that day, and it does not say a name. The first thing you feel is appreciated, grateful. Someone else,
Mhm.
in order to be appreciated, someone else has to be grateful. Look at it that way.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. And I think the anonymity of it is interesting because this is what I'm saying, because it removes the idea of validation. Because
Yeah,
as soon as you start placing names, all sorts of other connotations and ideas surrounding that relationship, power
yeah,
dynamic, everything other, right? So,
yeah.
yeah, again, gratitude lists generally, whether it's for oneself or it's a gratitude list for, that around us. I think they're phenomenally helpful and powerful.
There is another one we had found in a different workshop. Instead, in addition to expressing this on the desk, etc., we created a gratitude bank, like a spreadsheet, or like a box where you can just go and put a thank you note.
Okay,
Instead of a complaint box, there was a thank you box,
nice.
and that was seriously helpful. And we asked them sometimes to print it out, because otherwise people kind of see whose handwriting is that.
Hmm. Well,
And
you went
then,
one further. You went one further on the anonymity, but that's good. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And you see, if there is a company of 8 people or 20 people, it's very easy, right?
Hmm.
And then people either feel uncomfortable about it or sometimes artificial about it, and there is nothing worse than an
Hmm.
artificial thank you. Right? So
That is true. That is true. That is true.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think beyond that, it's like you say, when you're in a small environment, a few staff. Again, there already will be alliances, and even in a larger environment, like people form cliques and things like that. So the whole point of this is to almost not break, because you don't want to sever people's bonds. It's about opening
yeah,
and giving responses to everyone because we interact with everyone. So yeah, so I think just generally, if organizations could incorporate some sort of gratitude, thank you kind of practice, you would see it. And everyone talks, about business culture nowadays. So in understanding business culture, sorry, one second, come in. In understanding business culture, it's all right, 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 it's all right. Go, we're live, so you are live to the world. But yeah, so in business culture, culture always um, supersedes competition. Have you heard that phrase before?
yeah, yeah,
I think there's one similar in BNI. But yeah, but it's interesting because because a culture is long lasting. Competition goes up and down, right? You always
yeah,
have new players, you always have people with new talent, etc. But culture, culture lasts for thousands of years, right? So
yeah,
if you can create a culture of understanding at work, a culture of gratitude, a culture of therapeutic communication, all these things we're discussing today, you're going to win even in terms of your results and beating the competition, in my opinion.
definitely. In fact, as a strategy person, I love this one: culture eats strategy for breakfast. So
Ooh, that's a bar. I like that. I like that.
the
Yeah,
thing is,
yeah.
I see also that culture can be helpful and unhelpful. I don't say right or wrong. I only say helpful or unhelpful.
Indeed.
I'm not a judge of what is right or what is wrong, but there could be a situation where um, people say, "Oh, we have always done it this way," and "Oh, this person will not like it anyway. So why should I put my 100% into this work or something like that?" And so unhelpful culture is also stays in a long term,
It's
and
true.
it takes step by step process to actually come out of it. um, So I'm just going through one more question. Which one should I pick next?
Yeah.
We looked at the budget friendly ways. In fact, the question also mentioned, are there any physical things to do as well, where we do a dog walking club there, where people go for walks together, and there is a dog owners club in couple of companies. Speaking of BNI, I was visiting a specific BNI, and there was a presentation going on, and there was this person who had done a lot in the background to make the presentation happen, and without telling her, the rest of the team had put only 3 quid each, but they got a wonderful bouquet for her. And
Nice.
it was a surprise thing, it was a wonderful thing, it was an appreciative thing, and it did not cost more than 3 pounds
Hmm.
per person. And these kind of things actually make someone's day, and it becomes like a story to remember for years to come in the company. So that's amazing.
So
um,
true.
Educational. I saw one very interesting one which I kind of lost in the list here. I'm trying to bring it back. Um, yeah, we talked about how do you prioritize self-care among founders and leaders, which is about the
Hmm.
oxygen mask. Oh yeah, this is the one.
Go on.
I have team members taking too many breaks.
I love
How
this
do I
one.
manage that? So I
Uh,
would love to hear your comments before coming with some actual
oh.
case studies and some comments from my side. But tell me more. We encourage breaks, but what happens when it becomes too many? And what's your experience?
Yeah, I think, look, again, most of these things are down to trust,
Mm-hmm.
trusting your staff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like through lockdown, people started working from home, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can see some companies have really evolved and understood the model and feel now actually in some way it's more beneficial to the business. you know
Mm-hmm.
Less micromanagement. Again, ironically, I'm somebody who doesn't like to focus on outcome, but when it comes to systems and business and other things, like, obviously their outcome is important. And so in worrying so much about breaks, yes, you're going to have individuals who may push the boat a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
However, again, to punish everybody because
Mm-hmm.
of a few,
Mm-hmm.
again, to me, is just fear-led behavior.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas if you can understand why those individuals, amongst the rest of them, after giving them the freedom and liberty of managing themselves to some degree more so, why
Right.
are those people, those individuals, pushing it too far to the extent that now their responsibility is diminishing, rather than being empowered and enhanced, right? Because that's essentially what it is. If you give somebody the opportunity to take breaks when you wish, as long as you get the work done, as long as you're constantly in communication, often you'll find people a lot more enthusiastic and happy about being at work. But so it's
Yeah.
interesting when somebody's experiencing the opposite, you have to ask what is still wrong in the environment, or what is lacking in the relationship between you as an employer or you as a manager and your staff member.
Amazing. So, to add to this, first of all,
Mm,
loved it, and it's extremely correct and relevant. But just to add, I'll give a real example from my past.
please.
Uh, Connect it with something that I've seen with children as well. So, second point, and finally, and say a couple of results that came from such breaks as well. So, this example,
Interesting.
same company, different branches, some in Germany and some in France,
Mhm.
and same manager from Europe. I was in the European team, so I could see multiple countries and how it was. And in France, after the meeting, the same topic, they actually encourage people to take a break, go to the coffee room or smoking area or whichever way, depending on the culture and the location. But in Germany, they actually made it a point saying, no, you have to stay there for this much amount of time. And they put additional timing, even for every break. They started counting how long was the person outside the building and
Mm.
when is the person coming in. and they found that the French team was performing way higher than the German team, even though the German team was spending much more time in the building, in the meeting, and so forth, but the outcome was worse. And the leadership was actually encouraging people because they knew that they gave the idea in the meeting. They asked the question. In fact, many times some they asked the question, does anybody have a additional question, and everybody keeps quiet, but everybody starts talking in the coffee area after that.
Hmm.
Not in the real meeting. And they said the real decision is actually happening in the coffee area as well. So they incorporate into the culture over there. They encourage that. The second point was about, as long as the outcome is engaging and
Hmm.
happening, that's enough. And this is where I bring children there. While teaching in schools, I found that there are two kinds of noises: engaged noise. The child is blabbering about the task at hand. He or she is so excited about whether it is coding or drawing or maths or whatever. And there is disengaged noise where they have not got it. They have extra energy or extra motivation for something else, and they just want to look outside the window, do something else, because the person, in that case the teacher, in a company the employer, is not able to give them that mental engagement inside. Hence they are looking for a break. They're getting the same dopamine or serotonin or whatever from something else outside, right? Hence, if they are taking too many breaks, according to the question, it is
Mm.
saying something about the culture. And we could run some kind of social experiment by calling them in, talking to them, initiating conversation, playing some games the way we talked about, or asking them to draw something or whichever way, and use it as a feedback mechanism. That say
Mm.
then saying that from now on, every time you step out, I will time you out, and every time you step in, I will time time you in. That doesn't work from that
Yeah,
perspective.
it's interesting because, again, we talk about being present.
Hmm.
And, just because
Mental.
one is physically present doesn't mean they're mentally and emotionally present.
Right.
So, like you say, it doesn't surprise me. And it's interesting. Why do some organizations, some industries follow one model and others another model? It's very interesting to see. But I like you have learned many a time from experience that, you know, long term, I believe, the one which is more fluid always works better.
Yeah. More helpful
Um,
and fluid. Yeah.
yeah,
And speaking of that, the last point I was making about some results that came from breaks, if you see, and this is, you can go and Google it. Gmail was invented during break times. 3M, which are popular for their post-it notes,
yeah.
was invented or discovered during break times. um, some of the biggest discoveries have happened during break times, and companies are actively asking employees to take breaks. And it's more about helpful breaks, engaging breaks, energizing breaks, rather than going for something that is not helpful and coming back to the same thing without, oh my god, I have to now do this again.
And often you'll find that if somebody is policed on their breaks, that's what's going to happen, right? Because they find that they're being imprisoned when they're in the environment. So when they leave for a break, their mind, they want to almost escape,
Yeah,
so it's not going to be intertwined with thoughts about work again, right?
yeah.
So yes, I think,
It takes a lot of time to restart to come to that zone once more. So by switching tasks and by taking too many breaks, which are unhelpful,
mm,
um, we are actually losing that momentum in that case. But I think for leaders and team members, both ways,
mm.
is it being helpful? Whatever is being helpful, we need to do more of that, and that will help them grow.
It's a fine
Um,
balancing act. Yeah,
Exactly. Looking at the time, we have one more that we can do, and this one
let's
is
do it.
kind of one of my favorites because
Mm.
It connects to something that we do in our workshops, and I would love to hear your opinion. So
Please.
it was about how do we regulate emotions in the workplace. We are taught to regulate emotions in school, especially if we are misbehaving, but nobody talks about this in the workplace. And I'm worried about political correctness slash incorrectness. So, um, would you like to take it, or do you want me to?
Listen, it's an interesting one because I look. I will only say this because I do recognize that, from a managerial standpoint, it's difficult if people are having emotional outbursts or if they're overwhelmed emotionally, right? But I'm a therapist first, right? And a life coach. So my standpoint would be again to understand your staff. Um, there may be something going on for them externally which you're unaware of. Like there could be so many things, um, but somebody I know, I was going to say their name, their boss, extremely good boss, clearly because he's built a multi-million pound business, etc., etc. But when his father passed away, um, he seemingly, and he's a bit of a shouty guy as it is, but people understand his emotional outbursts, right?
Mhm,
But he went to another level of anger, frustration, and other hard emotions that people are finding very challenging in the workplace. So, so again, in that circumstance, who gets rid of the CEO, right?
mhm,
It's easy for us to dismiss those who are junior to us, who might be going through, as you say, emotional things. And even when we talk about politically correct, and I don't know if you want to jump in there, because the thing about the politically correct thing is sometimes I recognize, though,
mhm.
there's a time and a place for certain conversation,
In the
and thus
context, in the
and the
context as well.
context as well. So yeah, but that would be my initial thoughts on it. Yeah.
So here, I would give the answer in a couple of steps so that I can probably do justice to the whole answer.
Mm.
By the way, who can fire the CEO is the board or the shareholders.
Yeah, yeah, you're not
Uh,
wrong. You're not wrong. You're not
yeah,
wrong. But
and
what I mean by that is, on a daily basis, like,
correct, correct. On a
within
day-to-day basis
interaction.
in small things. I mean, we don't want to wait until that situation to start with. But one key thing I mentioned to many team members is they should have a helpline, an anonymous helpline, and there are many helplines available outside in the society and in the government as well. If there is something that they need to talk about, and there are support groups outside which can work as pseudo help situations where people can go and say, you know what, this person is extremely senior, but I can't do much about it, but I had to talk. And if it crosses the line for safeguarding, then we definitely have to take it to the next level. But coming back,
Mm,
um, and without touching in whether it is politically correct or not correct,
mm,
I have actually picked up something from how they teach teenagers to do emotional regulation. And we use this thing, I mean, in the actual systems, they use a four colored system: green, blue, red, and yellow. And I'll share a graphic later under this video so that people can see it. uh, and our normal day-to-day thing is the green zone, and doesn't mean that you have to be the best version of yourself. It's just you, green zone, right? The usual you, let's call it the green zone.
mhm,
The blue zone is the physical tiredness. If you haven't slept well, if you haven't had food, if you have been watching a screen and your eyes are tired or something, blue. Yellow is overwhelm or over rushing kind of things where you need to slow down, even if things are at a deadline. If you do it step by step, you produce a better result compared to if you rush it. And red zone is when people have started expressing verbal abuse, physical abuse, or something, like the one of the managers you were mentioning. um, I see that as an indicator. It's like the check engine light on the car. It is saying that, sometimes when you're driving for too long, the car says, please take a break.
mhm,
Right? So it's telling you something. And the interesting thing is, you don't need to
mm,
go from red to yellow to blue to green. From
mm,
blue you can go to green, from
mhm,
yellow you can go to green, and from red you can go to green. So it's not sequential, and they
Hmm.
actually do this in high schools and colleges, but unfortunately they only do it to so-called send kids, because I don't know why they don't do it for everybody.
Hmm.
Why I mentioned so-called is I feel this regulation is for everyone,
I
and they
think you're
should be
right.
they
I
should
think
be
you're right.
more inclusive about that. And what we do in Mindly is I use the initials B, M, and I for these green zones and red zones, etc. And B is for body.
Hmm.
What can you do with your body to come from the red to the green, or yellow to the green, or blue to the green? As an example, if I'm in blue, I could have a sip of water, have a nap, have some food,
Hmm.
go for a walk, do something physically.
Hmm.
If I'm in yellow, I need to belly breathe, sleep,
Hmm.
and go engage. In many companies they have this. You can go and play games, or do
Hmm.
something else, etc.
Hmm.
with your mind. M is for mind, so B is for
Hmm.
body, M is for mind, and
Hmm.
I is for intellect, where people go and do crosswords, or
Hmm.
I mean, do something that engages them intellectually. That could be different things for different people.
Hmm.
For some people, coloring within the lines itself is intellectual. For some people, they go and watch a quiz show on TV,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
something else, etc. And if your mind is tired, use the body. If your body is tired, use the mind,
Do you know
and so
what's
forth.
just come to me as you're talking? It's again, it's about being proactive with your destination as opposed to reactive, because
Mm, I
ultimately,
like that.
like because many people forget that you are in control of your mind to a certain extent, right?
Hmm.
So, whilst it may be operating on a form of autopilot, everything is wired. And
Yeah,
that's everything that you've downloaded. So, in the same sense, we can go back and rewire to some degree by just starting a new activity, engaging our
definitely.
brain in a different direction.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's really interesting what you mentioned there. Yeah.
And speaking of political correctness or incorrectness, my way of saying it is, if we are worried about political correctness, then it definitely is. So let's
Hmm.
just forget it.
Hmm.
Instead, can we look at it as, is it helpful or unhelpful?
Hmm.
And if it is creating a helpful result at that point of time, it's extremely important that we go towards growth using the helpful result.
Hmm.
And i- a silence because of political incorrectness is worse than somebody saying something which is helpful but on the borderline of political correctness or incorrectness.
Hmm.
Many problems have been worsened by silence,
Hmm.
and I think we should respect that, especially out of self-care and self-love, right?
100%.
uh, i- I'm not talking about shouting slogans from top of buildings for silliest of things,
Hmm.
but if we keep quiet for major things, thinking it is a silly thing, then probably the first person we are hurting is our own self, right?
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
to start talking. In fact, that's one of the questions we can then end today's call, looking at the time.
Hmm.
And we have some more questions. Please send your questions to us, and we can keep answering this. Next time we'll come up with some more things, because as we talk with more founders, more um, people who are going through normal life, so-called normal, the
Mm.
more we talk, it becomes a diminished problem, because we are sharing. um, 50 years ago we were not talking about certain topics that we talk very very openly these days, and
Hmm.
it's only for the better. So if it is helpful, it's important to share.
100%. 100%. Sharing
Yeah,
is caring. Sharing is caring.
sharing is caring. Inayat, sincere thanks for making the time.
It's a
I know
pleasure.
you are a very busy person, and right after this, you have something else as well. I wish you all the best, and
Thank you, sir.
I'm really excited to the next one, and to answer some more questions, as well as discuss some more. So have a wonderful day and take care. See you next time.
You too, Jeev. It's absolutely a pleasure as always. Blessing, sir.
Thank you.